Hi everyone. Welcome to the exciting new podcast for first year students in section 2 and section 4. I've combined your sections together for this week's podcast and I'll explain that a little bit later. But first, let's just review some important reminders about these podcasts. First of all, as you've probably already noticed, I didn't plug in any of the general education courses that you're taking onto the master schedule. So if you are taking English, French, Humanities, Gym, and we hope you're taking those courses as you move through the program, you'll have to plug those into your own master schedule in terms of assignments, readings, homework, and all of that. I can't keep track of that. You're going to have to do that yourself. Also, remember that I cannot guarantee that I'll have the information from your teachers in time for any given podcast. So I can't guarantee that everything that I'm presenting in the podcast represents all of your homework for that given period. So that's important to keep in mind. Also, remember that sometimes teachers go crazy and change their mind and do things like give extensions on an assignment to the whole class. And so, if there are ever any discrepancies between what I'm saying in the podcast and what you think you're hearing from your teachers in class, always double check with the teacher. That's the best way to handle that situation. In the last podcast, I invited you to send me your tips and strategies for being organized and managing time effectively and promised that you could become a podcast star. Well, this week we have a shout out to Catherine Fortin, who is one of your fellow ECE students. She turned me on to this great website, thecosmicroad.com. It was created in 2016 by a student in Australia. That's what the landing page looks like. And it's got lots of great resources, tips, motivational strategies, all kinds of stuff like that. So, for example, tips for studying for final exams, but these could also come in handy. I know you're studying for your Intro to ECE midterm. How to create an oral presentation. This will come in handy at some point. And there are also templates like this. So this is a blank sheet that you can use to list and organize all of your assignments and schoolwork for an entire semester. That's a really great resource, really great website. So thanks, Catherine. In the last podcast, I did stress the importance of staying organized. Very quickly, this podcast, I would like to talk to you about organizing your time between classes. You are first-year students. Sometimes first-year students are not too sure about how to use their time wisely. But now that you are well underway into the semester and have started finding your way around the N building, let me ask you, Section 2 and Section 4, is this ever you in the middle of a class? You suddenly realize that you gotta go. Well, my tip for you is to go pee on your breaks. I know it sounds like a dumb thing to say, but it's true. If you get up in the middle of a class to go to the bathroom, it can be disruptive, not only to your teacher, but also to your fellow students, and could be perceived as disrespectful. So, go pee on your breaks. That's a way to organize your time. If you still need any more motivation to do that, in a future podcast, I can take you guys on a tour of some of the nicer bathrooms that we have here in the N building. All right, so how about assignments for the next 2 weeks? Before we look forward, let's just look back a little bit. I know that you have written your first test in the affective relationships course with Jean. And so in the next podcast, I'm going to share some tips in collaboration with Jean about how to get the most out of the feedback that you get on that test. So if you don't get 100% on that test, how can you use those results, that feedback, going forward and use your time more effectively, study more effectively, things like that. And this will help you not only in Jean's class, but also on lots of other assignments, tests, and things like that for other classes. So that's coming up in a future podcast. All right. Here is your master schedule for your ECE courses for the weeks of September 25th and October 2nd. Just a quick note, you'll notice down here, Turkey, you can just see him peeking up there. October 9th is Thanksgiving. No school that day, but there are no schedule changes for the rest of that week. So that's important to know. All right. Back to the assignments. The first one I would like to highlight is my own. On Monday, your 3 anecdotes are due for the observing class. Also, I'd like you to prepare for this week's lab in observing by deciding on the targeted behavior that you are going to use for your ABC sampling. We'll talk about it more in class on Monday, but I want to give you the heads up that that's one of the preparation items that I want you to get working on before the lab this week. All right, also for the observing course, a couple of other notes. I will be loading up onto Omnivox some tips about how to read our textbook most effectively and most efficiently, so read through those. That's important. Also, I know that even though it seems like December 6th is a long way away, it is not too early to start working on the research paper. So step one would be to read the reading packs that I've loaded up onto Omnivox for you, and take notes as you are reading. So one of the things you can write notes about is, do you notice any similarities or points that are the same amongst some of the sources that you're reading? Also, you might want to highlight 2 or 3 great quotes that you might eventually use in your research paper. And I always think it's a good idea to write a little summary of each source after I've read it. That way, when you go back and consult your notes, this can help you stay on track. All right, so that's it. Also, next week, for the Intro to ECE course, Amy has invited Carrie Clow from Task to come in and talk to you, to give you a research paper on, to give you a workshop rather, on writing a research paper and on APA formatting. So this is going to be really helpful. Your research paper in Intro is coming up on October 19th. And also remember, Amy asked me to remind you that she wants you to send or show her the articles, the 2 scholarly articles that you will be finding to do that research paper. So do not proceed before you do that. And I encourage you all to listen very carefully at Carrie's workshop, because that will also help you write the research paper for my class and any other course that you have a research paper for. Also, the last thing that I want to highlight, very important, on October 5th, you've got your midterm in Intro. That's worth 20% of your final grade there. I do have a couple of tips for studying for that midterm in Intro. First of all, Amy will load up a study guide. She's going to be sharing that with you, and so that's very important to review that. And also, don't tell her I told you, but according to Amy, the PowerPoints are very important. I'm not saying that's the only thing that's going to be on the midterm, but the PowerPoints are important. All right, so that's it for the weeks of September 25th and October 2nd as far as the information that I have. Going forward, I would like to continue to personalize these podcasts, and so this brings me to my next challenge, which is for each section to come up with a fun nickname for yourselves. And if you do, I promise that I will never again combine Section 2 and Section 4 into the same podcast. So maybe something like this, The Rule of Twos, or 4 on the Floor. That could be some fun names for your sections. Think about it, put your creative thinking caps on, and send me your ideas. As usual, post your comments on YouTube once you've viewed the podcast. Remember that a full transcript is available underneath the video. And of course, stay tuned for the next announcement, which will mean that a new podcast is ready to go. That's it for me. Have a great week, everybody. Thanks. Bye.